and gentlemen, a hugely warm welcome to tonight's Wharton Prize. I'd call it a prize. In fact, it's actually just a recital. This is an opportunity for us to provide an evening of solo piano music of the very highest order and to give you a wonderful pianistic experience. It just so happens that at the end of it all, we have a wonderful adjudicator who will stand up and just say a little bit about each of the performances and award the Wharton Cup, the Prize Wharton Cup, to the performance that he feels deserves the cup. But actually, it's more, as I say, a celebration of piano playing, and as if to epitomise that, we have a performance of the Lutoslawski Paganini variations, just to give a little bit of time for the adjudicator to have a think. We've had a fantastic afternoon. We've had 3 festival classes, which have effectively been mini master classes. In fact, they've actually been not mini at all. They've been massive lessons that Aaron has very kindly given to all of the boys. So full of wisdom, so full of experience, so full of empathy, nurturing and kindness. And it's very rare, trust me, it's very rare to find an adjudicator who can approach some of the most elementary pianists who are still dealing with posture, still dealing with finding their notes, but can also provide the sort of forensic advice that's needed at the very, very top level. To have that breadth of teaching ability is extremely rare, and we are so very lucky that Aaron could come here. And I'm doubly lucky. The warden wrote me a note the other day. He said, this is my final term, and of course, therefore, my final Wharton. He said, avoid too much nostalgia, or something along those lines, anyway. There's a little bit of nostalgia here, because Aaron was one of my first adjudicators when I was in charge of the Wharton Prize in the early 1990s. And I remember him standing here on a much sunnier day. I think it was in June then that we actually had the Wharton Piano Prize. And having heard all of the performances, he just stood here and he said, I really enjoyed all of that musical playing. How can you not be inspired, he said, when you are standing here on a day like this, overlooking this fabulous vista with these wonderful grounds and this fantastic environment. He said, you are so lucky. And that stood with me for, about 30 years, actually. It's been in my mind. And it's so lovely, almost cyclic, to have him back for the final Wharton, for my final Wharton. Thank you so much, Aaron, for coming all the way from Glasgow to be here. I don't need to tell you anything about his pedigree. It's all on here. You will realise yourself when you've read it just how fortunate we are. But I'll say my thanks at the end, a few more thanks at the end. But meanwhile, on to the piano playing. It's going to be a wonderful evening of varied repertoire and some really good musical playing. And we're going to start off with Leonardo. his comments and words and decision, we're going to have a musical interlude as the Lussosofsky Paganini variations. Just before I invite the boys onto the stage, first of all, I just want to say my own huge thanks to all of the performers tonight for making it a really, really special Wharton from my point of view, and I hope from yours as well. Some really impressive, musical, committed playing. Thank you very much, all of you. And I also want to say a massive thank you to our fabulous team of piano teachers, in no particular order, as they say. Susie Allen, Debbie Carr, Jan Loeffler, Alex Hawkins, Rebecca, Jeff Young, Simon Waterton and Sam Mitchell. Thank you very much to all of you, most of whom are actually here as well in the audience, so thank you so much to you all.
Thank you so much. It's a real privilege to be here, not only for this evening's wonderful concert, but also for the day, which I shall again remember after, it must have been almost 30 years ago, that I first had the privilege to visit this wonderful school, this wonderful place. It's very special. As you know, elsewhere throughout the country, music has been under threat, the teaching of music in schools. And, we've seen an inevitable decline, but thankfully there's still places like Radley that exist that value music to this extent, to the point that, I'm really excited to hear about the plans for expansion of this music facility, which will really take it into generations beyond. And you don't know how lucky you are to not only to be in this very beautiful environment, but to actually be studying with high-level teachers here, and all, under the direction of Anthony, for so many years, leading the keyboard department in a way that once you leave here, hopefully you'll appreciate the opportunities that you've had. Anthony referenced that quote that seems to have stuck. I didn't realize it would have an impact, when I mentioned how important it is to be surrounded by, beautiful environment. But the origin of that thought was actually from Rosina Levine, one of the great Russian pedagogues who was married to Joseph Levine, also a fellow student of Rachmaninoff back in Moscow days in their conservatory. And Rosina was also a fantastic pianist and great teacher. And there was a point when I studied at the Manhattan School of Music, which was the old Juilliard building. And Juilliard migrated to their new home, which was Lincoln Center, into a modern building. And I think Rosina was lamenting the fact, having been so many years at the old original Juilliard, which is now the Manhattan School of Music on 122nd Street and Broadway, so right in the kind of the fringe of Harlem, but in the grand old historical building, where the rooms had space and the practice rooms had windows and things that all contributed to a very nice environment. And when they moved to Juilliard, and the students were practicing in little tiny white cubicles with no windows, and she said, "How is this possible?" Said, "When I grew up in Russia, I was able to look outside and see nature and trees blowing." And said, how could you know about rubato without seeing trees in motion and so on? And that was the kind of the origin of when, and I saw this, amazing environment, and that's where it was coming from, all the way back to Levine's, observation that these are the kind of necessary things to really experience and understand music on a deeper level. You have to be connected to the world and to nature as well. So Anthony and I also, I know we weren't going to dwell so much on nostalgia, but we did study with the same wonderful teacher, Alex Kelly, and amongst many, many other distinguished people, in the profession, such as Jonathan Plowright. Has Jonathan been here for? Yes. So Jonathan Plowright, one of the country's, most wonderful concert pianists. Vanessa Latarche, who's the head of keyboard at the Royal College of Music. Myself, up into the Royal Conservatory of Scotland. But Alex's influence spread far and wide. And this is the kind of place that, he would have treasured, because a typical lesson with Alex Kelly was not just sitting down for an hour and a half and grinding through some repertoire. More often than not, I would play for a few minutes and he would say, "Oh, it's a fantastic day. Let's go for a walk in Regent's Park, or take me out to the pub, or for a meal afterwards." And every lesson was invariably followed by a letter in the post, handwritten letter, and not about the lesson that we just had. It may have been, but mostly it was about life, or it could be about poetry. And he had famously illegible handwriting that nobody could read, and so it was like a great puzzle. Lay out these pages on my breakfast table, and I would spend a week, like a crossword puzzle, trying to figure out everything that he wrote down, and then finally getting through it after a week, asking everybody what did they think this word was or that. And by the end, it was time for another lesson, and yet another letter following that. So we probably all have these kind of collections of amazingly poetic and inspired letters. But it was that aversion to putting you through a musical press and coming out as some kind of product at the end. Alex was totally averse to this. He treated everybody as an individual and cultivated. I didn't even realize it, but evidently he was tyrannical to some students and had them in tears if they didn't practice. And where others, I never knew that side of him. I always, thankfully I practiced enough maybe, but he would always tell me, don't practice so much. That was one of the kind of the overriding pieces of advice I can always remember. Don't practice so much. Why? I don't know, maybe he sensed a kind of pressure, kind of something, that I put myself through a ringer to try and, to reach, certain expectations and standards that I had of myself, and he sensed that was perhaps inhibiting. And so, those are words that I remember. Either that or don't be so boring, or, so. So I won't tell you the kind of extra connotation he put onto that, but it was not very polite. But so Anthony and I grew up with that. We were lucky to have that influence, but through the work that Anthony's done here, the work I hope I'm doing, up in Glasgow with my various contacts as well, and the work that Vanessa's doing at the Royal College of Music, Jonathan, that's was a long-time faculty member with us here in Glasgow. Alex's voice, still lives on, and I can hear it being passed into the next generation. It somehow pervades because there's a humanity, that's evident, from hearing everybody play, and not only this evening but also earlier today, that this is not just some kind of pressurized environment, that's driven by prizes and successes and so on. So in a sense, yeah, you can see my preference is not to differentiate by first, second, third, or this and that. I didn't even like very much the classification system here in the UK. Your first class or second class or third class. Really, not something I was used to, and but just that label alone, I kind of run away from. So and if I had, they say that playing the piano could be one of the loneliest professions. I was glad that we finished up the evening on duo piano, which I love more than anything else, and so it's great that you've cherish collaboration and chamber music to this level. But maybe the next most lonely profession might be what I'm doing now, is trying to adjudicate a prize without anybody to bounce any ideas on. And I can assure you that it's really just like a very, very fine line that I would, could even begin to distinguish, several of you out. So I'm going through this with, the humility of this kind of task. Just realized it was very, very close, and I wish I did have somebody to bounce a few, opinions off of. So what I thought I'd do is just briefly go through. I've written, a few comments. Maybe we'll start with Leonardo. You started with the Ferguson, right? Yeah, really a wonderful choice of music. I thought he had a really comprehensive grasp, of number one. A lot of technical challenges, a lot of kind of negotiated the kind of geographic leaps over the keyboard really, really well. The main thing I thought maybe the articulation could be even more incisive and even more dramatic in order to really, bring that piece across. And there was a good lyrical approach in number two. I like that very much. Maybe you could just have a little bit more personal contact with the keys, the tone, just to draw us in a little bit more. I think you can draw sound out a little bit, something that's just a little bit placed onto the keys, and maybe the legato line to be even more persuasive. But very good start to the evening. Good, and then we had Kyle. Yeah, Constant, you played the arabesque, obviously really, really beautiful piece. I think you had a good flowing, sensitive conception of it. You understood the kind of this curvature of the Debussy very, very well, with the arabesque, whether it's the kind of the Islamic architectural reference, or even the reference in dance, this kind of swirling, idea. I think you caught that very, very well. They have a good ear for Debussy's sound world, color. I think you used good sensitive, concept of that. Your touch is clear, but sometimes just a little bit firm. A little bit. I think you could free that up, which would go much better with these kind of little swirling passages. And your wrist to be just a little bit more flexible and pliable. Okay, not floppy, but just a little bit more flexible. And that will give you a little bit more warmth and glow in the sound. Good. And Alex, yeah, correct. So yeah, you have this really, really challenging Rachmaninoff, the Moment Musical, and then followed it with Capucin. Nice contrasting program here. I thought you really were up to the challenge of the Rachmaninoff. It's a really, really tough piece, and I liked very much your articulation, but also that you were able to vary the pedaling so that it wasn't just a mass of tones. You actually lifted up the pedal, which is great. I was really, really happy to hear it. It's something I was lucky enough to hear the great Horowitz many, many times live in performance, and that's something he did all the time. Lift up the pedal, after having established it, but then sometimes, and especially in Rachmaninoff, you could play sometimes really dry and scintillating articulation by just changing these pedal textures, which you did very well. And also the depth of your pedal, which you did well. It's not just down or up, there's infinite number of little gradations of pedaling, and use it, especially in dense textured music like the Rachmaninoff. It can sound like a big block, but if you kind of cut through all of that massive sound, you start to hear underneath, the bones of the piece, which I think is very exciting. Your melodic line was well projected. I think it could have a little bit more depth. It was just a little bit placed and pushed out. It could have just, because it has to dominate over this, again, this very, very thick texture, so maybe a little bit more depth and warmth would help. Capucin was really good. I think that, again, really up to it technically, and stylistically you caught all of the kind of, qualities that make Capucin, exciting to listen to. It's a great entree into jazz for non-jazz pianists. I think you caught that bagatelle very well. Good. Kim. Yeah, that's right. So, busy night. So, you began with the Messiaen. I think it was a very fine performance of the Messiaen. I think you caught these, huge, massive contrasts very, very well. It felt like you inhabited the piece. It was under your skin. It's communicated, instantly. I felt drawn in. The very, very, very softest range you could explore a little more, okay? Because it really does, it uses the widest possible range. Maybe only when you get to Ligeti, where you get some really unbelievably, challenging dynamics like 8 Fs or 8 Ps, and you're going from that. Is that possible? I don't know. Maybe. There's a very funny true story of Arthur Schnabel, one of the great pianists of the century. The piano roll companies were trying to tempt him, I think it was Duo Art, to come and record, and they wrote to Schnabel and saying, "We have now perfected the process of the piano roll." This is before audio recordings. We've perfected the process. We can now record 6 distinct colors, dynamic levels. And Schnabel wrote back to the company and said, "Oh, thank you so much. I'm so interested to hear about these developments." He said, "I'll have to decline at this point," he said, "because I actually play with 7 colors." So, the point being, you can go just even that bit further with the very, very softest range. The Schumann Liszt Widmung, it was. I think you understand this. Do you know the song as well? Yeah. So it felt like you understood it. This kind of rapturous, dedication of love. It was lyrical and very deeply felt. I thought the melodic lines were really, really beautifully shaped and projected, and also some really lovely passage work that just flowed, and I think you really got underneath the skin of that very, quite difficult transcription of that Schumann song. Very good. And then we have James. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And so you played, again, really wonderful Prelude in B-flat by Rachmaninoff. But you started with Barcarolle, right? Yeah. Yeah. So I thought you caught the sadness of Tchaikovsky very well. There's this incredible kind of bitter quality to it, bittersweet, that sometimes, well, Schubert you would really associate with that, but Tchaikovsky also, especially in the seasons. So I thought this was very poised and sensitive. But the line, as a result, you could just have a little bit more forward direction so it doesn't feel blocked out. You can just have a little bit more motion underneath, so it's very hard to play very slow and legato. If you just get the tempo a little bit under, then it just doesn't flow in the same way, but still very sensitive. And your pedaling also needs a little bit more precision in Tchaikovsky. There was some blurring which was not fully necessary. Good. And Rachmaninoff, yeah, well, this one I think you responded very well to it. It was very passionate. You had really good command of the keyboard, very impressive virtuosity. Again, middle section, just a little bit more direction will help with legato, but I thought it was very exciting, and you caught the fire of that very well. And then we have Tristan. Yeah, that's good. I wrote your comments on it. There wasn't a form, so I wrote it, and then it can just attach to the front cover of that. Good is a really wonderful Prelude and Fugue of Handel, and I thought the conception that you had was really sensitive. Prelude, I thought, was unfolded, very, very stylistically aware sense throughout. Tonally and technically, I thought you could be freer. A little bit tight and just feels, and that just gives the kind of musical impression of just being a little tentative with it, rather than just letting your body relax and just let the sound flow through your body, through your arms and into the keys. It's amazing how this kind of percussion instrument, a kind of machine, can act, and how sensitive it is to the way we touch it. Basically, that's what the art of piano playing is. How do we touch the instrument to draw and elicit a sound that is everything? It's the full range of orchestra and beyond, whether it's vocal, orchestral, percussive, tender, hard, and millions of possibilities inside. So it's really important to have full understanding of how the body works in order to produce sound. So anybody can come, an amateur, people who don't play the piano can come and touch a key and a sound will come out. That's not the case for many other instruments. You wouldn't be able to do that on an oboe or a trumpet or a French horn. There are many instruments that you need a lot of knowledge and preparation to even make one peep out of the instrument. But with the piano, we could just come and touch it and something will come out. But that doesn't preclude that there's a great body of knowledge about technique and how we produce sound, how the body has to be naturally poised and relaxed in order so that you use the weight of your arm to produce the sound. And here, because it was a little bit tight, and I think that's the one thing that I would think of. But it was very intelligent the way you let the whole thing unfold. And the fugue was, again, very clear and controlled. The textures were really well thought through. I could feel it, unfolding very naturally. You could still use a little bit more dynamic range and shaping just to especially when you're going to cadences, and then you can change the colors. There are ways that we can shape Baroque music that's not just big waves and things, but actually, arriving at tonal cadential points and then changing the color at that. That would be a little bit more stylistically appropriate there. But it was a very serious and thoughtful performance, and so I like very much your approach there. And then we had Bernardo. Yeah, so you took on the Ravel sonata team, deceptively tough piece, and you had all of the kind of the equipment to really deliver, very convincing performance here. I found it was very refined. In the first movement, it was very transparent, your sound, and you had a real sense of pianistic control throughout. There were a few little technical inhibitions, nothing major, but just some tightness and a few things that didn't quite release. So if you just control that a little bit more, then it would give you even more flexibility. But it was still well managed. Second movement, also a very good tempo here. Okay, you found a very reasonable tempo minuet. Even though the minuet, when composers write tempo de minuet, what does it mean? It's the tempo of a minuet, or what is a minuet? Well, with hundreds of years of history of the minuet being danced, it's actually a little bit more difficult to pin down what a minuet tempo should be. Meaning that with hundreds of years of this dance being culturally, embedded in Europe, that it was able to evolve in many different tempi. There were fast minuets, there were slow minuets, there were courtly minuets, there were earthy minuets, and anything in between. So how you judge what a tempo of a minuet should be is very much instinctive, and I thought yours was very, very good. So Ravel and also Debussy, to some extent, they paid a lot of homage to the Baroque, which they loved. They kind of skipped over the Romantic and went right, classical, to sonatine, and also into the Baroque, in referencing some of their, So it means you have to traverse what would be, a 20th century composer's, take on a Baroque form. Okay, and he does this with Rameau and Debussy as well. Paying homage to the Baroque forms. So as a result, you have to figure out. There are some moments here in the minuet where you could breathe more. You can have a little bit more breath, a little bit more air in some of the phrases because you tended to pedal quite a lot through the phrases. Maybe look at the phrasing and then maybe you can also lift and experiment with lifting the pedal in certain points, just to give it still more of a Baroque reference, but within Ravel's context. Okay, it's a tough line to cross. Good. And the third movement was very exciting. I think we had a lot of facility, technical, facility was really very good here. Small moments of tightness, a little bit of restriction, but I like the spirit and the approach we had overall. Okay? Good. And then we had, the Beethoven. It's, Anthony. Yeah, Anthony, yeah. Good. So, this was, I think, the opening. Immediately you had, a real sense of again, a reference to a Baroque form, the French overture. Okay, this is what Beethoven is. It's very much like Bach's C minor partita. You know that. But here you could maximize more the dramatic intent behind this opening, and the rhythm. You can tighten rhythm up a little bit. Some of the dotted notes were verging on triplet. Da dee da 1 2 3 1 2 3 dum da dee instead of ba bum. It needs to be just a little bit more poised in that rhythm. And that climax just before the end of that, you can go forward a little bit more. It's a little constrained. And the Allegro, you had very good control of those difficult crossed hand sections, so that you conquered really well. But here I thought the whole dynamic range of the Allegro section was just a little constricted. It was a little bit within a narrow band. And you could be even more fiery and open with your dynamic range. Okay, so many positive things here, a lot of promising things, but just expand the sound. We have a fantastic instrument here, the Steinways. There's no reason that you can that would prohibit you from really opening up and going for an even bigger range of sound. Okay? So I think that's everyone. I think hopefully I haven't left anyone out. So it comes to, well, as I said, a little bit of a lonely decision. And I'm sure if it was any one of our wonderful colleagues here, might come up with a different order or arrangement. So what I decided to do was highly commend two, and one that I thought just kind of hedged, but really this is hardly anything in it. So I'd like to highly commend Alex and highly commend James. And tonight, just through my particular lens, I thought this is a performance that had the kind of musical expansiveness and coverage of different styles, and also just that little bit more freedom in the performance that certainly it spoke to me. I'd like to award the cup to Kim.
Gentlemen and chaps, I hope you realise that you are in the presence of a master here. I mean, I don't think we've ever had a finer adjudication, more helpful, more conveying more experience, conveying more spirituality as well. I think just wonderful. Take it all on board and move forward with it. Aaron, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very much.